Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
James, where are you? You said you would be home an hour ago. My wife Caitlyn shouted into the phone. Are you even close? Honey, I tried to explain calmly. I ran into some bad weather and had to adjust the flight path a bit. I just parked the plane in the hangar and I am now on my way home. Fine, just hurry up. I miss you and dinner is already cold. Darling, I promise I will make it up to you. I'm going as fast as the speed limit allows. I need to get home to my woman. Yes, I may have been overly dramatic, but I knew my wife needed to hear something like that from me at that moment. Ugh, you owe me for this, Mr. Holmes. Next week, you are all mine. She was referring to our long-awaited anniversary vacation, which we had been planning for months. No laptops, no work calls, no interruptions of any kind. I am serious, she continued. You cannot even talk about work. Do you understand? And the only appropriate response to that was the timeless phrase that every husband learns well. Yes, dear. This is my wife, Caitlyn. We have been together for 19 years. She is my first love. After her, my greatest passion is flying. We dated for nearly 2 years, were engaged for another year, and eventually got married. I believe the final push came when she discovered she was pregnant with our daughter, Madison. I proposed to her over a fancy dinner, and she said yes in front of a restaurant full of people. There was applause, and of course, there was a big kiss and an emotional hug afterward. However, whenever we discussed setting the wedding date, she became visibly nervous. I never fully understood what she was afraid of, but she always said she wanted to wait for the right moment. I knew she was the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, so I was never concerned about when it would become official. 6 months passed, and she told me she was expecting. I was overjoyed. We were the happiest couple we knew. We talked about the wedding again and decided to have the ceremony in July. She was due to give birth in December, so by then the pregnancy would be noticeable, but we would still have plenty of time before the baby arrived. The night before the wedding, Caitlyn chose to stay in a hotel with her parents, following a tradition that the bride and groom should not see each other before the ceremony. I thought it was a silly superstition, but I agreed because it mattered to her. Before she left, she came up behind me and hugged me tightly. Jim, I love you, she whispered, holding on to me like she never wanted to let go. I love you more than you can imagine. I cannot wait to be Mrs. James Holmes. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much I love you. Sweetheart, I said, taking her hands in mine, you already show me that every single day. You make me feel like the luckiest man alive. I love you with all my heart, from the day we met, and I plan to show you that for the rest of our lives. She turned me toward her, and we stood there, simply looking into each other's eyes. Almost at the same time, we both said, I love you. We laughed quietly and kissed, slowly and tenderly. Then she left. That night, I could hardly sleep without her beside me. Heaven help me if I ever have to get used to sleeping alone again. The next day, the wedding ceremony was exactly what she had always dreamed of, a large church wedding surrounded by our families. Her father walked her down the aisle, and it was clear how proud he was. He looked like he was holding back tears, but knowing him, he would never admit it. He was strong and reserved by nature. He was a man from another generation. It seemed to me that he had served in the military, specifically in the Marine Corps. After gently kissing Caitlyn on the cheek, he sat down beside her mother, who made no attempt to hold back her joyful tears. She cried openly, smiling the entire time. My own parents were seated beside me. They had already told me how proud they were of the person I had become. Now they simply smiled, and I am sure my mother shed a tear as well. When Caitlyn and I exchanged vows, we had written them ourselves. We felt that traditional wedding vows could not fully express the depth and power of our love. Caitlyn looked stunning. No, that word does not even begin to capture it. As she walked down the aisle toward me, she radiated with light, almost like an angel. Her white dress flowed elegantly, and she looked absolutely breathtaking. I was so captivated by her face, glowing with happiness, that I completely lost track of time. There I stood, in a rented tuxedo, next to the woman of my dreams. She was petite, around 170 centimeters tall, with naturally beautiful curves. I do not mean she had a model's figure, but to me, she was more beautiful than any model I had ever seen. She had graceful legs, which transitioned into elegant hips, and a toned, healthy body. Her appearance was not only lovely but also vibrant and full of life. Her features were perfectly proportioned, and what captivated me most was her face. Her skin was as soft as mink fur, and her long, dark hair framed her face beautifully, gently swaying in the breeze. She had styled it perfectly that day, but her eyes were what truly held me. Deep blue, full of warmth and love, they had the power to look right into your soul. To me, they were windows into her world, a world I was so grateful to be a part of. I never quite understood what she saw in me. I was an ordinary man, a little taller than her, about 175 centimeters, and weighed roughly 80 kilograms. I considered myself intelligent, but certainly not exceptional. What I did know with absolute certainty was that I loved her more than I loved myself, and I hoped that would always be enough. As she reached my side and gently nudged me to turn toward the priest, I snapped out of my thoughts. I heard a few quiet chuckles from our guests. Internally, I dared anyone to mock me, who would not be awestruck standing beside someone like her. We stood hand in hand while the priest spoke poetic words about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. The message was beautiful, though a bit formal. That was why we chose to write our own vows. It was my turn to speak first. We had not really discussed it, but Caitlyn simply gave me a look, and I understood. As usual, I agreed. Any married person knows that this would not be the last time I would say, "Yes, dear." I took out the card I had prepared and began to read. Caitlyn, before I met you, I thought I was happy. But once you entered my life, everything changed. I cannot imagine life without you, and I never want to. You are my heart, the very meaning of my life. I promise to dedicate my life to making you happy. I promise to always take care of you, no matter what, and to be there just for you. I looked into her eyes and finished, "I love you. And I thank God every day that you chose to spend your life with me. I promise that I will always love you." I heard a few people sob quietly in the room. I had never felt so emotionally close to her as I did in that moment. Her eyes sparkled, and a wide smile lit up her face. It was a smile I will remember for the rest of my life. Then she read her vows. "James, you have no idea how lucky I feel to have found someone like you. Every day, I thank fate that I found a person who loves me so fully and sincerely. You always know exactly what I need. You always understand my thoughts and feelings. Sometimes, I feel as though we are the closest people in the world, as if we are truly one soul. Every morning, when I wake up and see you next to me, I know the day will be wonderful. And every night, I go to sleep grateful to God that you are there when I open my eyes again. I love you, James. I promise to always be there for you, to help you the way you help me. I swear before God and all these witnesses that I will love only you. You are my entire life. The words "I love you" are not enough to express the love I carry in my heart. I will share that love with you forever. By that point, I was holding back tears. We had not read each other our vows in advance, wanting to preserve the sincerity and emotion of the moment. I am deeply thankful that we made that decision because the moment was absolutely perfect. Afterward, I could barely hear the priest asking for the rings and instructing us to place them on each other's fingers. He said a few more ceremonial words, but I only heard him clearly when he finally said, "You may now kiss the bride." It is remarkable how the smallest moments can bring back the most powerful memories. But let us return to the present. My wife had been referring to our trip to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. We were planning to celebrate our wedding anniversary with a trip to the Cayman Islands. We had arranged to stay for a week, spending most of our time in Grand Cayman, in a waterfront bungalow with access to a private beach. Even after nearly 23 years of marriage, we were still deeply in love. Naturally, our romantic life was not as frequent as it had been in the early years of our relationship, but we remained close and affectionate, sharing quiet, meaningful moments together several times a week. When our daughter Madison was younger, there had been a period when we struggled to find time for ourselves. During those early years of parenthood, we considered ourselves fortunate if we could find a private moment even once a week. A truly intimate evening together might happen once a month, if that. We talked about it openly. Neither of us was entirely satisfied during that time, not because the love was lacking, but because we both valued that closeness and missed feeling connected in that particular way. We knew we needed to balance our relationship with our responsibilities as parents and partners. As Madison grew older and more independent, we found more time to reconnect. I simply had to be a bit more discreet. After all, teenagers are curious by nature. My wife remained an incredibly beautiful woman in my eyes. She had always been that way. But over the years, a certain timeless elegance had been added to her beauty. She was not a celebrity or a famous figure, but she had a presence that lit up every room she entered. Even after more than 2 decades together, her appearance continued to captivate me. She maintained a slender figure, weighing around 54 kilograms, and carried herself with graceful confidence. Her long brown hair, now slightly wavy, reached halfway down her back. After Madison was born, her body changed slightly, her hips became more rounded, and her naturally modest figure adjusted in subtle but beautiful ways. She worked diligently to regain her strength and energy, waking early for morning runs and being mindful of her health. She made an effort to eat healthy, and thanks to her care and encouragement, I ended up losing a few kilograms myself. No matter what the future holds, to me, she will always be the most beautiful woman in the world. As I drove home that evening, my thoughts drifted back to how our lives had been recently. My business was thriving almost too well. The success had reached a point where I was working far more than I would have liked. This began to create some tension between us, and I could sense that it weighed on her. She had already suggested multiple times that I consider hiring another pilot to help ease the workload. I had resisted the idea for a while, but lately, I had started to think she might be right, even if it would slightly reduce our income. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I hurried into the house. My wife had left dinner waiting for me on the table, and I could hear the sound of running water coming from upstairs. She was likely in the shower. Deciding that dinner could wait, I wanted to reconnect with her and express how much I appreciated everything she did. I quietly made my way upstairs, gently closed the bedroom door behind me, and began to undress. Then, carefully and silently, I opened the bathroom door. As I stepped closer to the shower, I heard her voice. "Darling, is that you? I left food for you in the kitchen," she said, her voice carrying a hint of frustration. I slid open the glass shower door and stepped inside, closing it quietly behind me. I wrapped my arms around her and kissed her gently, pressing close in a warm embrace. She put her arms around my shoulders, and I held her by the waist. "I saw the food," I whispered, smiling. "But nothing compares to you." She looked up at me and smiled, then pulled my face toward hers and kissed me again, softly. I closed my eyes, holding her closer as our kiss deepened. There was tenderness in the way we touched, carefully, lovingly, as if savoring the moment. Her hands traced gently along my shoulders and down my neck, pausing at my collarbone. The warmth of her touch stirred something inside me, not just affection but connection, a shared understanding that spoke without words. We stood there quietly for a moment, close and still, soaking in the comfort of each other's presence. The tension that had lingered between us over the past few weeks began to melt away. Our kiss gradually slowed as she pulled away slightly. Lowering her lips to my shoulder, she leaned in close, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath on my skin. That subtle touch sent a gentle thrill through me. She had always known how to stir these emotions, how to ignite that quiet flame between us, one that burned not with intensity alone, but with care, patience, and affection. When she finally looked into my eyes, I saw more than just desire. There was something deeper, an unspoken connection that had always existed between us. Her gaze was soft but profound, filled not only with longing but also with understanding, vulnerability, and that rare kind of intimacy that cannot be fully put into words. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible but unwavering, "I need this right now." I pulled her closer, wrapping my arms more tightly around her shoulders. She relaxed into me, her body responding to every movement, every touch. Her skin felt warm and soft beneath my palms, and in the stillness of that moment, I was struck by how truly precious it was. Just the two of us, no distractions, no noise, just closeness, trust, and love. I ran my hand gently down her back, and with every motion, I felt how deeply connected we were. It was clear this closeness meant as much to her as it did to me. She shifted slightly, looking up at me with a gaze full of tenderness and quiet strength, the kind of strength that had always drawn me to her. "Don't you dare tease me," she said with a playful smile, her voice laced with warmth and affection. I could never resist that smile, even if I wanted to. So we stayed close, letting our silence say more than words could. Every glance, every embrace carried meaning, layers of understanding, shared history, and quiet devotion. In those moments, all our feelings and even our smallest dreams seemed to intertwine. "Darling, I love you so much," I whispered. "Forgive me for being late." She pressed her head to my shoulder and replied softly, "Shh. I forgive you. I love you too." Afterwards, we finished our shower, dried off, and went to bed. We lay there wrapped in each other's arms, whispered goodnights, and drifted off to sleep. I do not know what my wife dreamed of that night, but I dreamed of her. I saw her again, standing in the warm light of that same shower. The next morning, our routine continued as usual. She prepared waffles and sliced fresh fruit while I brewed coffee. I quietly cleared the untouched dinner plate from the night before and poured 2 steaming cups of coffee. Life went on, but it was the quiet, shared moments like these that reminded me how lucky I truly was. She served breakfast, and we sat together at our small kitchen table, talking about our upcoming vacation. It felt good to share a quiet morning with her, just the two of us making plans. When I stood up and said it was time to head to work, she gave me that familiar look, the one that gently expressed her frustration with how much of our lives my work seemed to consume. I turned back, walked over to her, and wrapped my arms around her tightly. "Honey," I said softly, "I know work has been taking up too much of our time lately, but I promise I'm going to fix it. Next week will be just what we need. And when we get back, I'll talk to Cyrus about hiring another pilot." "Okay." She looked up at me and smiled. "Are you serious?" "Oh, James, I just miss spending time with you. I come home from work, and the house feels so empty and lonely until you walk through the door." "I know, honey. I miss you too when I'm away. You know that, right?" "Of course I do," she replied, her voice quiet. "But that doesn't make it any easier." She was right. There was no use trying to deny it. I simply nodded, kissed her gently, grabbed my coat, and left the house. She usually left for work a little later than I did. Fortunately, I had no flights scheduled that day, just some paperwork and a few phone calls, so I was able to return home earlier than usual. I hoped the small surprise would brighten Caitlyn's day. When I stepped into the house, it was empty. I loosened my tie, turned on the television, and sat down to watch the news. About 30 minutes later, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. A moment later, the front door opened, and my wife walked in wearing workout clothes, slightly out of breath and covered in a light sheen of sweat. "You just came from a run? Or the gym?" I asked. "Yes, I went to the gym," she said, smiling as she stepped inside. "Well, what a pleasant surprise. I got home earlier than usual," I said, smiling back. She smiled again and said, "Really? That's such a nice surprise. You've been working so much lately." "I know," I replied. "That's why I wanted to surprise you. I don't want you to think I've forgotten how important our time together is." Still smiling, she wiped her forehead with a towel and walked toward the bathroom. While she was freshening up, I went into the kitchen, took out 2 glasses, and opened a bottle of 2010 Cabernet, letting it breathe a little before we sat down to enjoy it. A few minutes later, she came out of the bathroom looking refreshed and radiant. She sat down next to me at the table, and we began to unwind together. We enjoyed the wine slowly, talking calmly about the day. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught our attention. A moment later, the door slammed, and within a minute, our daughter Madison walked into the living room, confident and a little sassy, as always. We had never spoiled her, but sometimes she acted as though the entire world revolved around her. Lately, though, she had started to show more maturity, and that gave us hope. Caitlyn never admitted it openly, but I could tell that Madison had inherited some of her personality traits. Caitlyn had a fiery temperament, although she kept it under control and only revealed it in the most serious situations. In all the years we had been together, I could count on one hand the number of times I had truly seen her angry. "Hey, Maddie, how were your finals?" I asked. We sometimes called her Maddie, which was the nickname she had asked us to use around the middle of her second year in school. "Oh, thank goodness they are finally over. I cannot believe I have to go through this for another 3 years, she exclaimed, flopping down on the sofa dramatically. "But now you can say that 1 quarter is already behind you, right?" said my wife. "And besides, you are officially on vacation now. In a few days, you will have the entire house to yourself, unless, of course, you are planning to throw a huge party here while we are away," she added with a playful wink. "Oh, yes, exactly. You two are heading off to some tropical paradise without me," Madison said with a laugh. "Sweetheart, you know how stressed we have both been lately. We really need some time alone to recharge," Caitlyn replied gently. "Yes, I know. I hope you both manage to relax properly." "I hate it when you argue," Madison said with sincerity. "Okay, now that that's settled," I said, trying to lift the mood, "where would you like to go for a celebratory dinner now that exams are done?" "Well, since you asked," she said, brightening, "I have been dreaming of trying a place for quite a while. I think you have both been there before. It is called La Mer Restaurant on Franklin Street. They have these massive marble columns, and everything looks so elegant. At least, that is how it looks in the pictures. Oh yes, I remember that place. Honey, did you not try the crab cocktail there? I asked Caitlyn, and she nodded. Of course we can go there, I said. Madison jumped up with excitement and ran to her room to make what she called very important calls. I was surprised she was calling anyone. She usually communicated almost entirely through text. She was always messaging on social media, whether on Facebook, Snapchat, or one of the many other apps I could barely keep track of. Funny how times change, I thought. When I was her age, girls still spend a lot of time on the phone in their rooms, but I spent most of my time outside with my 2 brothers and sister, playing in the yard. Even when we got older, we stuck together. High school brought changes, of course, as it should, but I could not help but wonder how different my childhood might have been if we had the technology that exists today. While Madison was getting ready, Caitlyn came up to me, sat on my lap, and said with a soft smile, "You know what seafood does to me." I returned her gaze and smiled. Of course I do. Why do you think I brought up crab cocktails? She laughed, stood up, and as she walked away, I gave her a playful pat on the backside. Even after all these years, I still adored that mischievous spark in her. She turned around in surprise, pulled me into a kiss, and kissed me with such passion that, for a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. Yes, she was clearly in a good mood, and I had every reason to look forward to our evening together. Just as I was lost in that thought, the doorbell rang. Who could it be? I walked to the door and looked through the peephole when I suddenly heard a familiar voice shout, "Open up, it's me." It was my friend and business partner, Cyrus. I opened the door, and he walked in with that usual relaxed confidence he always carried. It is hard to describe Cyrus in one word. To be honest, he is a bit cocky, but that quality is part of why our business works so well. When it comes to clients and contracts, he goes the extra mile and never leaves a dollar unclaimed. We started our company about 10 years ago, back when we were both working for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Our job was to deliver supplies across the country, and we noticed a gap, a need for reliable transportation services in smaller-scale operations, especially where larger companies struggled to keep up. That is when the idea came to start our own business, focused on small but frequent cargo transportation. After the Hurricane Katrina crisis in 2005, FEMA revised its logistics policies, and we saw an opportunity. That is how Rapid Relief Logistics LLC was born. Cyrus was not just my business partner, he was also one of my best friends. He was a lifelong bachelor and proudly so. He loved dating but often said he was not built for marriage. And to be honest, I agreed. He loved his freedom too much to settle down. Now and then, Caitlyn and I would go on double dates with him when he needed someone to balance out his more unpredictable energy. Letting him go solo was always a bit of a gamble. Caitlyn suggested that the 3 of us go together. In the end, her instincts were usually right. It always turned out well when she made the call. "Hey James, thanks for letting me in. We need to talk." "So I decided to stop by instead of calling," Cyrus said as he stepped inside, giving a quick glance around the house. "You know we're having a family gathering tonight. What's so important that it couldn't wait?" I asked, noticing that he already seemed to have made a stop at the bar before arriving. His shirt was a bit wrinkled, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. Still, I decided to join him for a glass and offered him a drink. "Hey old man, want a drink?" "Sure. Do you have some tape?" He replied with a grin, clearly joking. "Yes, we have a single malt right in the closet," Caitlyn said, popping her head into the hallway and pointing to the correct cabinet. "I know where it is." Just kidding, I laughed, winking at her and giving her a light, playful tap as she walked back to the bedroom. She just laughed, unfazed, and I went to pour our drinks. I took out 2 glasses, set them on the table, and poured us each a couple of fingers worth. I knew he liked his whiskey on the rocks, so I added some ice cubes to his. I, on the other hand, preferred it neat. "All right, Cyrus. Tell me, what was so urgent that you had to come in person instead of calling or texting?" I asked as I sat down across from him. Cyrus's expression grew more serious. "James, it looks like we have a problem with one of the contracts. We need to meet with Christopher Hood, the senior director, to discuss our latest delivery logs and also to explore the possibility of a new contract for disaster relief supplies in Mississippi and Missouri." I raised my eyebrows. That was unexpected. Usually, we had no issues with our contracts. Still, a potential new order didn't surprise me, considering the recent situation in the South. Record flooding had hit the region again, and the Mississippi River had overflowed into several communities. That's strange. When's the meeting with this guy? You know, Caitlyn and I are leaving for the Cayman Islands on Sunday. It's our first real vacation in years, I said, a little uneasy. I haven't forgotten about your trip. You definitely deserve it, my friend. The meeting is set for tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They initially wanted us to come to their office, but I arranged to meet at our place. I'm sorry to distract you right before your trip, but if we talk it over together, I'm confident everything will go smoothly. Cyrus always knew how to choose his words. He was a great motivator, even if he did sometimes go a little overboard with motivational cliches. Of course, I didn't really want to spend the evening discussing contracts, but he was right. Together, we had always found a way to succeed, and we had secured more than one lucrative deal over the years. All right, buddy, I'm in. Let's just try to wrap it up quickly so I can finish packing, I said. Of course, buddy. Say goodnight to Caitlyn for me, but only after I'm gone, he added with a wink as he stepped out and closed the door behind him. I headed to the bedroom to change for dinner. Looking at the closet full of clothes, I did what every brave and decisive man does in moments like these. I asked my wife for help. She laughed, already expecting the question, and picked out a pair of gray pants and a light blue button-down shirt for me. I put everything on and spritzed a bit of her favorite fragrance, Calvin Klein Obsession. Caitlyn was just finishing getting dressed in a fitted outfit that accentuated all her best features. It never failed to amaze me how women manage to wear dresses like that, but I certainly was not complaining. Can you help me zip it up, honey? She asked. Of course, I replied, walking up behind her. I gently zipped up her dress and then leaned in, placing a soft kiss on her neck. Then, I blew lightly on the spot I had just kissed, knowing exactly what effect it would have on her. She shuddered slightly, turned to me, and hugged me tightly, pressing her chest against mine. It felt like this evening was going to be something truly special. We kissed, and then she gently pushed me away to finish getting ready. I stepped into the hallway and knocked on my daughter's door. Are you ready? Almost, Dad. Just a minute, okay, she called back. No problem, honey. Take your time, I said, knowing full well that her minute would probably stretch longer, but I didn't mind. I went into the living room, turned on the television, and decided to check the weather forecast while I waited for my girls to finish getting ready. About 20 minutes later, Madison came out of her room. She looked amazing, wearing a light peach-colored dress and modest low-heeled shoes. Her hair and makeup were done tastefully, and there was already something of her mother in the way she carried herself. I felt proud of the young woman she was becoming. Another 10 minutes passed, and then my wife emerged, walking slowly down the hallway toward us. She looked absolutely stunning in that same elegant dress paired with high heels. Her hair was curled and swept over one shoulder, and her makeup was done neatly, with bold red lipstick and just the right emphasis on her eyes. As she stepped into the living room, she turned slightly, and I caught the familiar scent of her perfume, Sunflowers by Elizabeth Arden. It was one of my favorites, and Caitlyn knew it. Whenever she wore it, I would gladly become her devoted companion for the evening. Wow, Mom, you look absolutely stunning, Madison exclaimed. And she was absolutely right. She's right, honey, you look amazing, I added with a wink. Well, my ladies, are you ready for a wonderful evening? Yes, Dad. Let's go. I'm starving, Madison said with a smile. We all piled into Caitlyn's Cadillac, since my little Volkswagen Jetta would not have been ideal for a night like this. On the way into town, Madison chatted excitedly about her summer plans. It looked like she had a busy season ahead, filled with outings and time spent with friends. When we arrived at the restaurant, I found myself once again in awe of the place, as if I were seeing it for the first time. The restaurant had an almost regal presence. It could be compared to a Greek palace, with towering marble columns, luxurious countertops, and polished tables. The bar was especially striking, evoking the elegance of a grand saloon, almost as if it had been lifted from the set of Titanic. This place carried the spirit of tradition, opulence, and timeless charm. After a short wait, we were shown to our table. Soon after, our waiter, Marcus, appeared, took our drink orders, and stepped away. So, Mom, have you told Dad yet? Madison asked, turning to Caitlyn. No, honey, not yet, she replied, and then turned to me with a look that was slightly uneasy. To be honest, it made me a bit nervous. It sounded like my girls were keeping a secret from me. The last time they surprised me, I had to convince the authorities that I was most certainly not an international terrorist. But that's a funny story for another time. My girls have always had a knack for creating mystery. Well, Dad, Madison began, I spoke with Mom a few days ago, and I wanted to share something with you. I've met someone, and we've already gone on a few dates. She invited me to go with her to Virginia Beach this weekend for a beach festival. She spoke carefully, clearly nervous, watching my reaction closely. At first, I tensed up slightly. I had been to my fair share of beach festivals in my younger days, and I knew they could be full of fun, but also full of youthful adventures, some of which were best avoided. I was also momentarily caught off guard. My brain had automatically assumed we were talking about a guy, and I was already preparing to ask the usual fatherly questions about him. But then I realized what Madison had actually said. That's when it hit me. My little girl wasn't so little anymore, and she was ready to tell us something personal and meaningful. She likes girls. Madison looked at me with slight anxiety, waiting for my reaction. Not wanting to keep her in suspense, I responded quickly. Madison, you could have told me sooner. Yes, I'm a little surprised, but I love you with all my heart. You never needed to be afraid or worry that I wouldn't support you. She visibly relaxed, almost sinking back into her chair with relief. Oh, Dad. I was so scared to tell you. I was afraid you wouldn't approve. Sweetheart, I said gently, your mom and I will always be here for you, no matter what happens in your life, especially in your personal life. So, what's this girl's name? And when do we get the chance to meet her? Her name is Tara. We met at university. And you'll get to meet her next week when she picks me up for the beach trip. We're going on Friday, and she'll swing by the house before we leave. You're coming back from vacation on Thursday night, right? Yes, honey, we'll be back late Thursday, Caitlyn confirmed. Just then, our waiter returned with our drinks, took our food orders, and left us again. As expected, Caitlyn ordered the sesame-crusted tuna, and I went with the duck fillet. Madison chose the farm egg fettuccine. We chatted a bit more about her girlfriend, and soon, our food arrived. Over dinner, the conversation shifted to a few new movie releases. We all agreed to see one of them together after our respective vacations. Later, my wife and I shared a dessert wine while Madison enjoyed a slice of cheesecake. I felt completely satisfied, both physically and emotionally. I couldn't be happier. Looking at the two of them, I smiled and said, I love you both so much. This evening has been incredible. Words can't describe how grateful I am. Thank you for being the best family in the world. I love you. We love you too, Dad, more than you can imagine, Caitlyn added warmly. As we stood up to leave, Caitlyn leaned in and whispered in my ear, and I'll show you just how much tonight. She smiled with a playful gleam in her eyes, and I couldn't help but smile back. Her confidence and affection filled me with joy. We drove home peacefully, discussing our upcoming trips and how we'd each get to our destinations. We fly out Sunday morning, Caitlyn said. If all goes well, we'll be back in Richmond around 7 p.m. on Thursday. I could hardly wait. That night, we said goodnight to Madison, then went to our bedroom. Caitlyn closed and locked the door behind her, a familiar, welcome gesture. She dimmed the lights and tilted her head slightly, her eyes sparkling as she approached. Wrapping her arms around my neck, she said softly, I've been looking forward to this all evening. Without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed me. Time seemed to disappear. The connection between us was strong and deeply familiar. Her touch, her warmth, it all felt effortlessly natural. The quiet intimacy we shared was a beautiful reminder of how close we had become over the years. There was nothing hurried about the moment. It was full of trust, understanding, and shared affection, the kind that grows deeper with time. Every look, every gesture between us carried the weight of our shared experiences and love. When our lips met again, the kiss was soft yet full of emotion, affection, passion, and a deep bond that only years together can truly build. She was filled with a quiet strength, as if she were trying to convey the depth of her feelings through her actions. Her lips moved gently over mine, and I felt her open her mouth, offering me a chance to respond. I did, allowing her warmth and energy to envelop me. Slowly, she rose slightly above me, her hands sliding gently along my neck, bringing us even closer, deepening our connection. We lost ourselves in the moment, in the soft, intimate touches that seemed to make time stand still. At some point, she paused, her breath warm against my skin as she softly nipped at my earlobe, something she knew I adored. Every time she did that, it sent a shiver through me. Her touch spoke to me, stirring the most tender feelings and memories. Her movements were slow and graceful, and I could feel her warmth, her presence, drawing me closer, as if we were both surrendering to the moment, to each other. We held on to that quiet, cozy closeness, letting everything else fade away. It was a moment that seemed too perfect to ever end. Eventually, she lifted her head and kissed me softly. "I love you so much, James." "I love you more," I replied with a smile. She nodded, kissed me again, and then stood. I watched her, my beautiful bride, as she walked to the bathroom. She wet a cloth and gently wiped her skin, then came back to dry me off. The room felt warm and intimate, so I got up and lit a scented candle, her favorite lavender. Afterward, I joined her, stepping into the shower just as she was finishing. We washed quietly together, not in a playful way, but with a tenderness that reminded us of our love for one another. When we finished, we dried each other off and climbed into bed. "Oh, I almost forgot," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What did Cyrus want?" I hesitated for a moment. I knew this news would not please her, but I had to share it. "He said some big guy from the firm wanted to meet with us," I replied. "It will be a short meeting, but still unpleasant. I'll have to step out for about an hour," I explained. "Wait, when should this take place?" Caitlyn's voice revealed her irritation, both in her tone and expression. "Tomorrow, in our office at 4 in the afternoon. After that, I'll come straight home to finish the final preparations for the trip." "James, doesn't Cyrus know we're leaving on Sunday? Did you tell him to go without you?" she asked, concern building. "Of course I told him, but it won't take long, darling. Please calm down. We're still going to have a wonderful time, and this won't affect anything. Except maybe dinner time," I reassured her. She seemed to relax a little, and after exchanging goodnights, we climbed into bed and switched off the bedside lamp. As I fell asleep holding her in my arms, I whispered, "I love you," and kissed the back of her head. The next morning, we woke up in good spirits. Caitlyn seemed much better, and we decided to grab coffee and bagels. On the way home, we discussed the trip. "I don't really want to work on Saturday, but it's only for an hour," I said. "It could mean a new, lucrative contract." Caitlyn suggested, after work, we could either go out to dinner or order something to eat at home. Meanwhile, Maddie and I were planning to hit the mall. I figured I could do a bit of shopping since you'll be at work. With that, Caitlyn and Maddie headed to the mall, and I decided to relax with a bottle of Sam Adams in my favorite chair. As I sat there, I reflected on how lucky I was. Wonderful wife, great job, reliable friends, and a fantastic daughter. If only I could find a way to ease the stress from work, my life would be near perfect. Though I'd have loved to spend the entire day doing nothing, I knew I still had to prepare for the meeting. After a quick shower, shave, and getting dressed in my usual work attire, button-down shirt and blazer, I preferred not to wear a tie. I was ready. For casual days or flights, I'd go for jeans and a t-shirt, but business meetings were different. Once I was ready, I checked my reflection in the mirror before driving the 20 minutes to the office. Cyrus and I rented a small office in a building next to the airfield, where our hangars with 2 aircraft were located. On weekdays, a few employees kept the operation running. Tammy, the office manager, Jenny, the shipping clerk, and Sean, our chief mechanic, who handled the maintenance of the aircraft and made sure everything complied with regulations. Although we were a small company, we still did a significant amount of business. As I entered the office, I immediately saw that Cyrus was already there, waiting. I walked into the conference room, which was located between Cyrus's office and mine. Through the glass walls, I could see that there were 3 other people with him. One of them was a man in a formal suit, sitting with a posture that suggested he found being in the room beneath him. Next to him sat 2 women, one blonde and one brunette. The blonde woman was notably taller than the man, almost an Amazon in stature, while the brunette, around the same height as the man, had a strong presence, with her distinctive features subtly showing through her loose blouse. I waved to Cyrus, and he looked up, noticing my arrival. I pointed to the coffee pot and gestured that I was going to get some. He nodded in acknowledgement, and I could faintly hear their conversation as I poured myself a cup. Someone spoke loudly enough for me to catch snippets. "This should go smoothly," I heard Cyrus say. "You'd better hope so," replied the man in the suit. Then one of the women spoke, "We can," followed by a simple, "Agreed," from Cyrus. After adding cream and sugar, I stirred my coffee as I made my way to the conference room. "Good afternoon, everyone," I greeted, nodding as I took a seat next to Cyrus. He immediately took the lead. "Let's get started. James, I'd like you to meet Christopher Hood. He recently became head of contracts at FEMA and has some questions for us about our current contracts. Mr. Hood, could you tell us what questions you have?" Then we can discuss the Mississippi flooding situation and how that impacts getting additional supplies to the affected areas. The man in the suit cleared his throat before speaking. I'm here to clarify some points and get a better understanding of where my predecessor left off. From what I've gathered, several contracts between FEMA and your company are missing required documents. Specifically, I've found several missing forms, which doesn't surprise anyone given the previous management. I thought it best to intervene directly. I could feel the conversation starting to turn into a time-wasting exchange, and I decided to speak up. Mr. Hood, I assure you that if any documents are indeed missing, we will locate them immediately and ensure everything is up to standard. We're fully committed to resolving any issues quickly and efficiently. I'll be happy to work with your department to get everything in order. Of course, we'll need to involve our lawyer to ensure everything is done correctly. But may I ask you a question? He nodded, and I continued. What happened to your predecessor, and why is this meeting happening on a Saturday instead of a weekday? I understand the importance of these matters, but I'm not sure I understand the urgency. Well, Mr. Holmes, he began. To be frank, my predecessor was fired for embezzling public funds. He's now awaiting trial for embezzling nearly $2 million from FEMA. As for the urgency, I know you're about to leave for vacation, and we need to finalize these matters before you go. I apologize for scheduling the meeting on the weekend, but I assure you it was necessary. He paused briefly before continuing. This brings us to the second reason for our meeting, the flood. As you may have seen on television, there is significant flooding across the Mississippi Valley, affecting Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The governors of all three states have requested federal assistance, and the president has declared a state of emergency to provide emergency assistance. This is standard procedure for such disasters. What you probably don't know yet is that even more heavy rain is forecast to hit the region in the coming week. We can't afford another disaster like Hurricane Katrina, so we need to act quickly. I understand now, I replied. I agree. We can assist in the hard-to-reach areas where your large aircraft might struggle to reach. This is exactly what we usually do, complementing your core logistics network. Turning to my partner, Cyrus, I asked, are we all ready to get started? I'll be able to assist with deliveries once I get back, but the first few days of flying will be all on you, buddy. Cyrus smiled and replied, yes, I can handle it. To be honest, I'm already a little tired of office work, so a change of scenery will be a welcome change. Mr. Hood, I added, if you send us a contract with terms and rates, we'll send it to our lawyer for review. If there are no significant issues, we can sign and return it to you the same day. Great, Hood exclaimed, turning to Cyrus. Well, gentlemen, how about we celebrate with a quick drink before I head back to Washington? I wanted to get back to my wife as quickly as possible and prepare for the trip the next day, but I realized that sometimes informal meetings help maintain business relationships at the right level. Well, one drink wouldn't hurt. Of course, I can have one glass, but after that, I'll need to leave to rest before my early flight tomorrow, I said. No problem. I have to get up early tomorrow too, Hood replied. I need to fly to the Gulf of Mexico to finalize the logistics plan for the major cities. We already have scouts working on the ground, so the plan is set. Everyone agreed to meet at Portside Bar and Grill, a small waterfront establishment where they had a real paddle steamer docked, which sometimes hosted small event cruises. Maybe it could be a future idea for a corporate event. Anyway, we all left the office and headed to Portside. I parked, got out of the car, and walked to the bar. It was a bit busy since the evening rush hour had just started, but there was still plenty of space in the bar. I looked around and spotted Mr. Hood and his companions, but I didn't see Cyrus anywhere. I joined the others at the bar and ordered a glass of Sam Adams. When the waitress arrived, Mr. Hood turned to me. So, Mr. Holmes, what do you like to do in your free time? He asked. I couldn't help but think of him as the man in the suit, even though he'd taken off his jacket after our meeting. I also noticed that the women he came with had their blouses slightly unbuttoned, revealing some cleavage. Even though I'm married to a beautiful woman, as they say, I'm not blind. Well, I love flying, especially when I'm at the helm. It's the second best thing in my life. The first, of course, is my wife, Caitlyn, I replied with a smile, thinking of her. I also enjoy movies and travel. I love visiting new places and spending time there. Interesting. If you ever find yourself in Washington, write to me, Hood said. I think my wife would be glad to meet you and your wife. I decided to engage the others in the conversation. What about you three? What do you like to do? One of the women, Missy, responded, well, I'm not sure what Laura will say, but I love dancing. I couldn't remember names very well, but I made a mental note of hers. Dancing is fun, I said, but personally, I prefer sailing. I have an old Pearson P-40 yacht 40 feet in Maryland. Laura then spoke up. As for me, besides work, I love a hectic lifestyle, always on the move. Life, international travel, fast cars, and enjoying time with friends, he said, glancing meaningfully at Laura and Missy. He winked and continued, my wife and I don't have children, so we like to hang out and enjoy life. Listening to him, I began to reconsider my initial impression. It seemed like he might have an unconventional relationship with his wife, though I wasn't sure. I also noticed that Laura had placed her hand on his thigh, and it seemed more than just a casual gesture. I took another sip of beer, appreciating how good the Sam Adams was. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my wife. I answered quickly, hi, honey. Will you be free soon? Missy, sitting closer to me, noticed and playfully asked, what about you, James? Do you like to have fun? I gently took her hand and placed it back on her lap, trying to keep things respectful. Mr. Hood, observing the situation, then asked, don't you find Missy attractive? At that moment, my opinion of him changed completely. It was clear to me now that he didn't respect boundaries. I looked at him, then replied, Mr. Hood, to answer your question, yes, Missy is very beautiful, but I prefer to remain faithful to my wife. My phone rang again. It was my wife, and I could hear the irritation in her voice. James, who's there with you? Honey, I'm at Portside, just finishing up with a FEMA guy. I'll be home soon, I said. Then, to my shock, she screamed into the phone, what the hell is wrong with you? Before hanging up without the usual I love you. I stared at the phone, confused and upset. I tried calling her back, but she didn't answer. I quickly sent her a message, I love you, and I'm on my way home. Sorry. Turning to Mr. Hood and the others, I finished my beer, stood up, and said, it was nice spending time with you all, but I have to go home. I hope you have a great time here in Virginia, and I hope we can meet again under better circumstances. I could tell that wasn't the reaction they had expected, but I didn't really care anymore. I left the bar, got into my car, and started heading home. On my way home, I found myself thinking about what had just happened. Where was Cyrus? Was my wife really that angry about my drinking after the meeting? And why had the FEMA people been so intrusive? I knew that when I returned, Cyrus and I would have a serious conversation about this day and night. I also realized I would need to somehow smooth things over with my wife. The journey home took about 20 minutes, and I tried calling my wife again, but it went to voicemail once more. When I arrived, I noticed that my daughter's car was gone, but in its place was Cyrus's car. I sighed, realizing I would have to talk to him right now. I parked behind my wife's Jeep, walked up to the front door, and found it unlocked. I opened the door and stepped into the living room. What I saw was the last thing I could have expected. On the couch, my wife, Caitlyn, was with my partner, Cyrus. Her dress was hiked up, and it was clear that something was wrong. Time seemed to stop, and I froze in place. Caitlyn turned her head, and her expression changed from one of relaxation to one of complete contempt. She even seemed to show frustration in her face before speaking. What the hell are you doing? I shouted in confusion. She shot back angrily. You were drinking and having fun with those people, weren't you? Just like you always do. I felt my confusion deepen. What was happening? Not only was my wife in this situation with Cyrus, but she was accusing me of things I hadn't done. The shock, the betrayal, it felt like something inside me was collapsing, crumbling with every second. Cyrus, meanwhile, continued, seemingly indifferent to what was going on. My anger grew stronger, but I couldn't move. I wanted to stop everything, but I hesitated. It wasn't until Cyrus turned and pointed a gun at me that I fully realized the danger I was in. Where did he get that gun? I thought to myself. He wasn't just my partner anymore. There was something else entirely going on here. Don't move, he warned, a grin spreading across his face. It seemed as though he was waiting for me to make a move, just so he could act on whatever twisted thoughts were going through his mind. There was something dark and unsettling in his eyes, like he had been planning this moment for a while. Who was he really? The question echoed in my mind as I tried to process the situation. I don't understand what you're doing, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. I never cheated on you, and clearly, you can't say the same. The meeting tonight was just a formality. I had a drink with the administrator and his team after a business conversation. I didn't do anything wrong. Cyrus continued to point the gun at me, while still engaged in a disturbing act with my wife. I wanted to scream, but no words would come. The pain in my chest was overwhelming, and the situation was becoming a blur. He held up a few photographs and shoved them in my face. "Freaks," he muttered. "They're on the table if you want to look for yourself." My wife's voice was muffled as she struggled for air. I wanted to close my eyes, but the reality of it was all too clear. I looked at the table and saw the photos. Honestly, I didn't care. I knew I had never betrayed her. Those pictures, surely, were doctored or fakes. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't understand why she would believe this. I glanced back at Cyrus, who was now pulling away from her. My anger reached a boiling point. Gun or no gun, I couldn't stand by anymore. I rushed at him, throwing a punch that landed hard on the left side of his face. He stumbled back, falling away from my wife, who collapsed onto the sofa in shock. Cyrus quickly turned the gun on me, and before I could react, a deafening shot rang out. The world went silent for a second. The pain in my chest was immediate and intense. I fell backward, crashing into the coffee table, which couldn't support the force, and shattered beneath me. I landed among the pieces of wood, the pain only growing as I tried to process what had just happened. It felt unreal, like a nightmare that I couldn't escape. The pain in my chest was unbearable, but strangely, there was also a calmness that settled in. Maybe this was it. Maybe death was the best escape from all of this. My best friend just shot me, after sleeping with my wife in front of me. And my wife, the person I trusted the most, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But then, as I lay there, I realized something. Death wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want him to die. I just wanted him to understand what I was feeling. "Oh God, James, no, no, no," she cried, rushing to my side. It was a strange display of concern, considering everything that had happened. She was now kneeling beside me, her hands trembling as she checked if I was still breathing. I glanced at the table again and noticed I was lying amidst the very photographs that supposedly proved my betrayal. I let out a weak chuckle, wincing from the pain. "How could you think I'd ever cheat on you?" I gasped, each breath harder than the last. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" The darkness around me deepened, offering a strange kind of peace, as if it were inviting me into its embrace. Cyrus had told me everything. He had shown me those pictures, and I had heard that woman in the background. "I love you," she had said, and it tore me apart to think of her with someone else. "I had to get back at you to even the score." There was a pleading quality in her voice, but to me, it sounded like empty excuses. Who had she become? The woman I had once considered my one and only? My beloved? "Do you love me?" I asked, struggling to believe my own words. "You loved me so much, and yet you let him." The words stuck in my throat. I couldn't finish. I would never forgive her. She broke down into sobs, and I could feel the weight of my own emotions crashing down. Cyrus stood above us, fully dressed, a malicious grin plastered across his face. He couldn't help himself, and he laughed bitterly at her tears. In a different time, maybe I would have felt pity for her, but not now. The pain in my chest only grew worse, and my head began to spin. I heard Cyrus' cruel laugh as he leaned in closer. "Ha. Finally, I've brought you both down to my level. You've always been so damn perfect, so saintly, it made me sick to be around you. I hope you enjoy your time in hell. Maybe I'll come back and have some fun with your wife again. After your funeral, of course." He laughed again, louder this time, and walked toward the door. "Are you coming with me, or are you staying with him?" "Go to hell," she shouted, the venom in her voice unmistakable. "Well, good luck in prison," he sneered as he tossed the gun onto the floor and exited, his grin lingering. I could barely comprehend what had just happened. The pain in my chest intensified, and my head was swimming. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was Caitlyn's frantic voice, calling someone in a panic. I slipped into the abyss, my thoughts consumed by a single, overpowering wish: peace. Death seemed like the only way out, the only release from the nightmare I had found myself in. The horror of what had transpired in such a short period of time was overwhelming. Death had seemed like an attractive escape at first. The first thing I felt was a sharp pain in my chest. Struggling, I opened my eyes and quickly realized I was no longer in my living room. Was I really dead? I looked around, doubting the notion of paradise if this was what it looked like. After blinking a few more times, I realized I was likely in an ordinary apartment. In the kitchen, a dim light hung above the stove, but the rest of the room was dark. An old table and several chairs were scattered around, with old, worn furniture. It became clear that I was lying on a sofa, its upholstery well past its prime. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was around 2 a.m. Where the hell am I? My chest began to hurt again, and the memory of the gunshot came rushing back. How had I even survived? Why wasn't I in a hospital? Struggling to sit up, I lifted my shirt to check my chest. There was no bandage, no blood, only a dark spot around my sternum. Maybe it was a bruise. The whole situation felt unreal, like something out of the Twilight Zone. The first thing I needed to do was go to the bathroom. My bladder definitely needed attention. The second thing? I needed to figure out how I had ended up here and how I could confront Cyrus. I still didn't know what to do about my wife. After everything I had witnessed, my trust in her was shattered. I stood up, surveying the room. I had no idea where I was. It definitely wasn't my home. Then a sleepy voice came from the hallway. "Hey man, how are you feeling? It's already 2 a.m. You should get some more sleep." At first, I didn't recognize the voice. But after a moment, I realized it was Sean, our mechanic. "Sean, what the hell was I doing at his house?" I asked him directly. "Sean, is that you? How did I end up here? And why am I not in the hospital if I was shot?" Sean came closer and sat down on the chair next to me, holding a silver chain with a medallion dangling from it. It was my medallion, an icon of St. Christopher. I noticed it was bent, as though it had been struck with great force. "Your wife called me," he said, his tone serious. "She said you were in danger and needed to be taken out of there immediately, that Cyrus was trying to kill you. She mentioned that he shot you, but she didn't see any blood. I didn't understand what she meant until I got to your place and saw you lying on the floor. Looks like you're incredibly lucky, buddy. You'll need to tell me everything." Later, Sean handed me my medallion. I took it and examined it carefully. The medallion was badly bent, but it was clear that it had stopped the bullet. Upon closer inspection of the damage, I realized it was from a small bullet, perhaps a .22 caliber. Of course, even such a small caliber could have been fatal, but my medallion turned out to be strong enough to save my life. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. The medallion was made of durable stainless steel, not soft metal. I involuntarily raised my eyes to the ceiling and mentally thanked whoever or whatever had saved me. St. Christopher, I thought. My wife had given me this medallion for my birthday several years ago, saying, "St. Christopher is the patron saint of travelers, so he will protect you when you are far from me." It was ironic that she had unknowingly saved my life with this very gift. She had given it to me, even though it now seemed like she had destroyed everything overnight. Be that as it may, I was grateful for my luck, but the pain in my chest reminded me that I was far from out of danger. "Okay, Sean," I said, "I'll tell you everything, but a little later. Where's your bathroom?" I asked, deciding I needed a moment to collect myself. He pointed towards the corridor. "At the end of the hall, first door on the right." I walked to the bathroom, cleaned myself up, and as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, why did Cyrus do this to me? Why did he betray me in such a brutal way? And most importantly, how had he convinced my wife to believe in a betrayal that didn't exist? It all felt like a terrible, distorted dream that had torn apart my life. Where was my wife now? Why did she call Sean instead of staying with me? Maybe she went looking for Cyrus. Maybe she was with the police. Perhaps she had been so terrified by everything that had happened that she didn't know what to do, so she called Sean. But now, I didn't know what to think. The person I once knew was no longer there. Everything felt endlessly complex and confusing. I tried to push those thoughts out of my mind and returned to the living room, lying back on the couch, hoping to get at least a few hours of sleep. Sean had already gone back to his room, and there was little time left until morning. "Sean," I said, "last night was the worst evening of my life. You don't have to tell anyone this, but Cyrus ran away from a business meeting with a client, and when I got home, he was with Kate. He shot me and seemed to be planning to kill me. Why the hell did he want me dead?" Sean stared at me with his mouth open, his expression blank. "Crap," he finally said, his voice shaky. "What the hell, dude? I always knew he was a scoundrel, but I didn't think he was capable of such a thing," I said quietly. "I know. Listen, do you know anyone who might be able to find him and figure out what he's up to?" I asked, hoping to get some answers. "I think I know someone," Sean responded, his voice sounding more confident. "We went to school with him. As far as I know, he was a cop before he became a private investigator." I chuckled at how corny it sounded, but Sean kept laughing along with me. "Yeah, I know. Everyone knows that one guy. I'll get his number." We sat in silence for a while, finishing our coffee. When it was time to make another cup, I stood up and filled both of our mugs. "You said Kate called you, right? What did she say?" I asked. I needed to know what had happened, at least for my own peace of mind. Dude, I could barely make anything out, Sean replied. She was hysterical and crying a lot. I could gather that you were in trouble at home and you needed help. After that, I heard her crying again, and I think she spoke to you for a moment before the connection cut off. Any idea what she might have said? I pressed. Something like I love you, or I'll always love you. Well, something along those lines, he shrugged. I tried to process his words, but everything felt muddled. I had always trusted Kate, and now I was doubting everything. How could she think I'd cheated on her? We had been through so much together, and I thought we had complete trust in each other. I always imagined we'd grow old together, watching our grandchildren run around. I had even dreamed of us on some beautiful secluded beach, just enjoying each other's company. But now, those dreams felt like nothing more than illusions. I sighed heavily, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The pain in my chest from the bruise intensified as I exhaled. Damn. What should I do now? It seemed like it was time to come up with a plan, but where to even start? Sean, I said, suddenly hit by an idea. Could you do me a favor? I need you to check my house and see if Kate's there. I'll go with you, but I'll hide in the back seat. If she's not there, I can go in and grab my things. If she is, you can tell her you took me to the hospital or something, okay? Sean looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Sure, dude. Whatever. What's your plan? He asked, clearly concerned but willing to help. I have a plan, I said quietly. For now, I'll lay low and figure out what to do next with Cyrus and Caitlyn. I know for sure that I'll finally confront Cyrus, but I'm not entirely sure what to do with Caitlyn. I love her more than I love myself, but right now, I also hate her. I don't really want to think about her right now, though. I'll have to face her eventually, but for now, the mere thought of her disgusts me. I'll probably never be able to erase the image of her with Cyrus from my mind. Okay, Sean suggested, let's get ready and go there. Then you can decide what to do next. That's the end of our first part of the story, but don't worry, there will be a second part of the story soon. See you later.